Pat Chats About. Pat Chats About is a casual conversation on a lot of different topics, and today we're going to talk about sustainability and we're going to talk about economics, and turns out those two topics have lots of overlap, and my guest, Richard Cook, is going to tell you about that overlap. Let's see if I hit the right buttons. Richard, you're on. Welcome.
We're on.
Thank you for the great humor. Richard is a mechanical engineer as a bachelor's degree, and as a master's degree, econometrics. He taught me how to pronounce that in the car. I already forgot. And he has a great interest in global sustainability and steady state economics, and that's what you're going to be talking to us about. And that's where sustainability and economics overlap. So what got you into all that?
What the heck is all that?
Amen.
I got started interested in this topic when my sister told me I should read a book called Ishmael, and she said, this book will change your life. And I was intrigued, of course, a little bit scared. I was happy with my life. I'm not sure I wanted it to be changed. But she suggested that I should read this book. And it's about a talking gorilla, which sounds a bit odd, but I think it's just the author's way of making sure everybody understands that this is a fictional book. So not to focus on the characters, the dialogue, or what the gorilla is saying, but focus on the message. And it ended up being about sociology and culture and the history of human civilization and how we got to be from the hunter-gatherers, self-sufficient and totally sustainable societies of the ancient times into the massive economic powerhouse, globally developed that the world is today.
Excellent. And let's talk then about these terminologies. The one I stumbled over first. Let's understand what I'm going to stumble over it again. Econometrics. That's it. Econometrics.
Econometrics is a mixture of the words economics and metrics, of course, and it's the statistical study of economic data as opposed to classical economics that talks in theoretical terms about models of supply and demand and other things that you may have heard about, the money supply. Econometrics is an empirical, or looking at actual numbers and data that can be gathered about people's behavior and learn things about economics or markets or labor or things like that based on the data.
And then global sustainability. What's that?
Sustainability is a concept that I think most people know what the word means. Sustainable refers to doing things in a way that can exist in that way forever, or at least for a long time. So we talk about sustainable or renewable energy sources such as solar and wind and wave power, geothermal. Those are sustainable energy sources. There's sustainable business practices and less sustainable business practices, and it just refers to how are you behaving in a way that can be continued forever, or are you doing
forever? You said a long period of time the first time, so I was going to ask you about that. But
well, forever is kind of a difficult concept, but in a way that's not going to diminish either the resources or the energy supply or something else in a way that's going to be that's going to end.
Right, because I was noting you had brought wind and all these other non-fossil fuels, but some could argue that some fossil fuels have lots and lots of resources in the earth, and you still just kind of keep digging them up. So those don't fall into sustainability, even if they could theoretically last a long, long time.
Yes, that's a very interesting point and a good concept, that even what we call the non-renewable fuel sources, fossil fuels, we're continuing to develop better technologies and drilling deeper in the oil shales and things that people hadn't heard of years ago to get more and more and more energy and resources out of the earth. And so you could argue that 100 years ago maybe we thought we had 200 years of supply of something, and now it looks like we got 500 years supply of something. Who knows what may happen in another few decades. Things that were once thought to be scarce through technology or discovery or other things that happen, end up to not be so scarce. But I still think there's a distinction between a renewable fuel source and non-renewable or fossil fuel sources, no matter what their abundance may be.
All right. And then steady state economics. Tell us about that.
Steady state economics is basically an alternative to the way the global economy works today in the developed world anyway, which is based on growth. If you listen to the news or read any books or any kind of investment or or a part of a public company or even most private companies, you hear the word growth constantly, and the whole survival of business in the world and of economies and countries in the world is predicated on the need for continuous growth. And growth, the way people term growth is typically on a percentage basis. How much did we grow? We're 5% bigger than we were last year, referring to the revenue or the profits of a company or the GNP of a country, the gross national product. That's all the goods and services that are being produced inside a country. And in order to sustain the global economy the way it is right now, countries and businesses must grow year over year over year by some percent. And the fast-growing ones are really, really happy and prosperous, and China is growing at 12% a year, and aren't they doing great? And some other company is maybe only growing at 0.5% a year, and so they have to figure out how can we increase our growth rate, and all of the political talk about how can we get America back on track to growth again, and growing jobs and growing this and growing that. And we don't want to go into a recession, which is the absence of growth by definition. That's the opposite of growth, is the recession, which everybody's so scared of.
Measured by 2 quarters in a row with no growth, isn't it?
The definition is recessing, going negative growth.
Okay.
That's what a recession is. And so the global developed world has built itself on the requirement for year over year percentage growth. And that 5% growth is exponential in nature. The 5% this year is so many $1 million, but if we grow 5% again next year, it's more, because each 5% stacks on top of each other. And
it's like compound interest at a bank.
Compound interest, exactly. It's exactly the concept. Put away $100 this year, you get $101 next year, now it's 103, 108, 115, exponential growth. And in a world where in order to produce those things, the gross national product, all those goods and services, the cars, the roads, the TVs, the things that we produce in our economy, all require energy. They all require raw materials that are either grown from the ground or dug up from the ground or fished from the sea. They all require raw materials and energy. They all produce byproducts or waste of some sort. Mm-hmm. And those things must come from our one and only planet. So the concept of, and this is the real point of the contrast between sustainable growth, which some people use those terms together, but really those are totally incompatible. Exponential growth cannot be, by definition, sustainable when we're on a single planet that has, at some point, a limited amount of resources and energy to be consumed in the production of all this stuff, and a limited space in which to put all the waste that comes out.
All right. Well, there's an assumption there I want to ask you about, because it seems to me, and I'm not what I'd call a historian, but it seems to me that people who do study history have seen many times where they said the planet cannot handle more than this amount of people, and we're doomed. Yes. We can't handle it anymore. And they were saying that hundreds of years ago, maybe thousands of years ago, and innovation happens, and we continue to handle the large population. Why now? Why is it not sustainable now when previously the concern over sustainability was found incorrect?
I think the now question is it's a good one, and I'm not saying that it's now or this century or any point in time, but just the simple concept that eventually now must come. And the debate of, certainly technology has in the past, like you say, had an opening effect where you feel the walls caving in, and then you go, hey, we're in a different room now. Look at all this.
Different room. I like that analogy.
But there's a limit. It seems to me that there's a limit. It can't go on forever.
Yeah. Okay. And then when you talk to other, I imagine it's not the first time you've had conversations with people who are not of the same mindset that you have. Did their eyes glass over on some of these words? I mean, to me, sustainability would even glass over, and you think most people know that term. Steady state economics must have people glass over, right?
Yes, there is an organization called the Center for the Advancement of the Steady State Economy, but it's by no means a popular thing, and it is a difficult concept. But hopefully people can understand at a high level that we want the world to be a safe and prosperous place for our children and our grandchildren to be happy. And I feel like I'm better off than my parents were at this age. I know they were better off than their parents were at this age. Will my grandkids be better off, more prosperous, more happy? Who knows?
Well, that's I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't even think about it. I thought some people define the United States as being successful if they're better off than their parents.
I think that's a wonderful way to measure.
But they hear sustainability and steady state and they think you're telling us we can't be. Mm-hmm. And we don't like you because of that, or we don't like your thoughts because of that. Yes. So don't you feel some pushback that you can't be better off and sustainable at the same time?
Yes, that is a very key. I mean, that's the puzzle, is how do we don't want to regress. We don't want to make the world worse than it was, than we have it. We don't want our kids to have it worse off. How do you balance the concept of the need to at least reduce the growth rate to give ourselves more time and possibly get to a steady state so we could have an indefinite amount of time and still be prosperous, still have people be happy.
So you don't think they're mutually exclusive?
I don't think they are. It's one of the messages from the Ishmael book and some of the other things that I've read is everyone's heard the phrase, money doesn't buy happiness.
Right.
Well, you can't be happy without at least a little bit, but once you get to a certain point, having more and more and more, right? If I had 5 million or 50 million, I'm not going to be that much more happy. And studies that have been done about comparing advanced economies, people who are living in the developed world, with some of the societies in even today's world that are self-sufficient and living in a sustainable way, similar to how groups of people lived thousands of years ago before there was the Industrial Revolution or anything like that. The amount of time, one of the things that's been studied is how much time do you spend feeding yourself and keeping your house versus how much time you spend in leisure activity and enjoying your family and your other people.
That's a metric.
And the proportion of how much time people spend just making ends meet has grown and grown and grown and grown after the Industrial Revolution. So if that's a measure of happiness, people were probably better off 200 years ago. They spent less time. You can make a lot of different arguments comparing our life to that point in time. Of course, I'm much happier to have lived now than in those periods, unless I was a king or something. But that's one measure of happiness is can we slow down the pace of progress and growth to such a point that people don't have to spend, and technology has helped with this as well, so much time feeding themselves and taking care of their families, and can have more time for things that are fun.
All right. Well, I want to remind everybody what you're watching. You're watching Pat Chats About. It's a casual conversation on a variety of topics. This is show 59, being live on Friday, April 20th, 2012. If it's after that date, then you're seeing it as a tape broadcast, and you can see recorded copies of all my past shows at patchatsabout.com. This is, as I said, show 59, so all the past 58 are all there. Today we're talking with Richard Cook about sustainability and economics, and we're going to talk to him some more about it. So the other thing I worry about is that those things, sustainability sounds such like common sense to me, but at the same time they get attached to people talking about global warming or doomsayers, the world's going to end soon, and those kind of people. And I wonder if that drags down the sustainability effort. Did they get hurt being put in the same category with those negative people or those crazy people or whatever?
Yeah, I think that's probably an accurate assessment. One of the people that's an economics professor formerly with the International Monetary Fund named Herman Daly, and Dr. Daly likes to say, "I'm not an environmentalist." A lot of the concepts, though, are similar, and his key contribution to this discussion is the idea of the classical economics that all of the federal bank people and the folks in government who make decisions about national economics are trained with an idea of a closed system, and there's a concept in economics called an externality. An externality is anything that's outside of your closed system. And for most models of economics, the world, the earth, is an externality.
Really?
So Daly likes to say you've got to bring the earth inside the model and treat the resources and the energy and the capacity for receiving waste as part of the model, part of the system.
Now, steady state economics historically, has that ever existed? Is this something theoretical that people are wanting to achieve but don't see it in the past?
I don't think so. I think the concept, at least as by that name, has only developed in the last generation.
Okay. And then is the people involved in this more philosophical than practical? Is this a philosophical debate, or is this a let's make this happen real?
Yeah, I struggle with that myself. I try to ask myself, what if I'm talking to someone about this, what's the takeaway message? What do I expect them to do? What should I do to make the world better for my kids and grandkids? And it's hard to think of what that is. Do I ride the bus to work today? Is that helpful? Sure. Is it counteracting the dozens or so of coal-fired power plants that are being built in China right now? Not. It's hard to figure out what an individual person can do to have any change here. I can't grow my own food. I'm totally dependent right now on the economy of Tucson, the developed world, for my livelihood. I do things that are valuable enough to somebody that they can pay me money, and then I can trade the money at the store for food and other things that I need to keep my life going. If that economy was not working, I'd be in bad shape.
Though there are people who are arguing that even in a very urban area that they could have some sort of garden on their balcony or in their backyard or something and grow some foodstuffs, right?
Yes, and there are efforts around the country to sort of shrink and have more community-based, self-sustaining, to some extent, communities.
Or even some communities have like a neighborhood garden that they share together.
Buy
right?
the locally grown food.
And that as well, so there's less travel for the food itself, right?
A lot of the waste in that industry comes from carting things here and there.
Well, one of the things that I did, preparing for this show, got an email on just by luck. Habitat for Humanity helps build homes, and they try to build homes with some sustainability involved, maybe not as much as the ideal situation. And they look for volunteers to help build those homes, but they can ask you which interest you have, and one of the interests that I had checked at one point was water harvesting. So when they have a water harvesting project that is just focused on that part of the house building effort, they ask for people who are interested in water harvesting, so you can learn more about water harvesting. So I guess as an answer to your question that you were asking yourself, how can I help sustainability? That may be one way, too, that someone could plug into a group like Habitat for Humanity and plug into those opportunities they want to learn about.
Or do that sort of thing on your own house.
Right.
I've got solar panels on my roof, so I'm operating a little bit more sustainably than I would have been otherwise. And everybody can do a little bit of something like that, riding the bus or riding your bike to work and those things. But I think fundamentally, we're still on this exponential growth path, no matter what any of us as individuals do, until we can, and this is what the Center for the Advancement of the Steady State Economy is trying to advocate within the academic and the political world. How do we make a transition from a world where we're dependent on this exponential growth year after year into a world where we're not? And we can still progress, we can still have increases in standard of living and still have people who are happy and productive without having to be on this path that's, at least from some people's point of view, can't be sustained indefinitely.
And you mentioned that a couple times now. So the website itself is steadystate.org. So the word steady, S-T-E-A-D-Y, state, S-T-A-T-E.org. And that website is full of ideas, you're saying, that's not on the kooky side, but really on the
they're
practical?
very good if you like NPR or those kinds of things that have topical content from good authors. There's a blog page that has a series of short articles. They have a position statement that you can read through in just a few minutes, and if it's something that resonates with you and you say, yeah, that sounds like something I could support, you just sign on, and they're collecting thousands of people who've become supporters of that idea.
And what else did you want to talk about today that I haven't questioned you on here? There was a couple of writers you'd mentioned to me. Is Daniel Quinn, Jared
Yes.
Diamond, and Herman Daly. Any of those that you wanted to mention? Or?
Those I did speak of before, except for Diamond. He's the author of a book called Collapse, which was another big stepping point in the reading that I had done on this kind of a subject. And Collapse is the study of societies in the history of the world that have, some of which have been successful for long periods of time, our own, which has been successful until the moment at least, and other societies that have failed for one reason or another. And there's examples that people I'm sure are familiar with in the Mayas of Central America, Mexico, South America, the Easter Island civilization that thrived at one point on this island off the coast of South America, and when the island was discovered by modern people, there was no one left there. And that's a particularly interesting one and kind of entertaining the way the book presents it. There's been a lot learned about what happened to that civilization.
Okay.
They were isolated on this island. They thrived for a long time, and then they are there no more. So what happened? And what they figured out was there was a large species of palm tree that was present on that island, and the society used it to make boats. They used it for all sorts of purposes on land. Their society was thriving and up to a point, and basically they chopped down all the trees.
And then they were in trouble.
And they were in trouble. And this another interesting concept, and there's a book by this title, The Tipping Point, that talks about it's not the person that chopped down the last tree that's the problem. It's somewhere back in time a while before when they chopped down the tree that got them headed off the path that was going to eventually lead to losing all the trees.
Well, the tipping point I've heard about as well also talks about positive change. You know, everybody used to spit before and they had spittoons, and slowly people said, don't do that. And they're like, well, how could stop people from doing that? And they stopped. And then smoking, everybody smoked, and then, there was a tipping point where people changed and said, hey,
Yes.
So there's some positive things about that. Maybe
Yes.
your sustainability can have that same kind of...
Possibly so, and we hope for a tipping point that is positive. One way that things can tip is to have a calamity, a catastrophe, have the financial crisis of 2008 repeat itself all over the world over and over again until the whole economy collapses. That's a tipping point as well, but hopefully we have one that's a little more positive.
Well, yeah, I'm hoping people work on the garden idea and the
Yes.
water harvesting idea, and that has a tipping point and moves forward, and using public transportation and biking and stuff like that. Well, thank you so much for being here, Richard. Being here,
It's been fun chatting with you, Pat.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed that very much. This has been Pat Chats About. We've been talking about sustainability with Richard Cook. It's on my website at patchatsabout.com. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.